Hello, welcome to our Module 3 or Week 3 lecture. Today we're going to be discussing education and employee workforce development, and that's going to encompass just a little bit of discipline. Again, this is a very brief overview on the learning objectives. Please just take some mental notes and understand that I'm trying to give you some pointers on how to lead and manage your organization. So let's start off with the well-trained workforce. Obviously, people feel like EMS is a very or litigious industry. It's actually not as bad as you would think. There are a lot of lawsuits that are filed. For the individual providers, it's usually pretty protected. We do see some issues where they sue the service, which as the manager, that would obviously adversely affect you. So some of the things that we want to do with our employee development is just prepare for that. And we don't prepare for the litigation that may come from the cause of our duties by making it scary for everybody to operate. In fact, I think on the opposite, right? We want our paramedics and our EMTs to utilize their protocols in the fullest sense of the industry and ensure that we are potentially not leaving any stone unturned. It's ultimately about the patients. So how can we protect them and encourage them to be much better? Well, the first thing we want to do is just ensure we have a well-trained workforce, right? So the problem with the cross-examination in any stand, if you get into depositions from a legal standpoint, is when they get there, they can tell the truth, so anybody who's worked in healthcare knows that you could go online and you could click through the videos, and whether you're actually learning or not, you're checking all those boxes for your corporate compliance and your Medicare stuff. But ultimately, when they come back, a deposition from an attorney could very much be like, well, has your boss ever told you that you were having a problem with intubation? Or has your boss ever told you that you should be using end-tidal CO2, or has your boss informed you of the newest utilization of, say, magnesium sulfate versus, XYZ drug? Don't ask me. I haven't touched a patient in a long time. In fact, if I start touching patients again, I really messed up my career. Loved being a paramedic, but I'm a little old to be carrying people down the steps. So these are the things that'll happen in deposition. And now the employee say, well, yeah, we watched a video on it, but it was never any reinforcement. And then they're going to bring in some expert in education who's going to talk about the different domains of learning. So the idea is, moving forward as a manager, is you should just walk in and prepare for a well-trained workforce. And I know that's not always easy to do, especially if we get into these really, really large services. But it's not impossible. And little simple things like workshops. The first thing I would say is, with well-trained workforce, is good incident critiques, good peer-to-peer training, quality assurance, building a culture of acceptance of mistakes. I tell people one of my roles in this position is to oversee a lot of the quality assurance that goes on in the entire health system. And I always talk to some of the medics, and I'm like, who wouldn't want a doctor to come tell you what your mistake was and how to not do it again, right? Where we start to run into issues is where people start to think, well, no, I'm going to get in trouble for this, or this is disciplinary. And that's what we can do as bosses. Is, number one, we can ensure our employees know that discipline is not necessarily punitive. Discipline is structure. Discipline is critique. Discipline is constructive, right? And that in turn leads to a well-trained workforce. The second thing about discipline is expectation. If we can create a sense of expectations when you work here, I mean, we understand it can be very busy, and it's raining right now. It could be cold. It could be snowy. It could be icy. There's all these things that go on, but respectfully, we all signed up for that. I had a great career in the field spanning almost 30 years, where I really enjoyed going into people's houses and taking care of them, and going into structure fires and going to car accidents. And I moved past that period of my life. I could go back and do it tomorrow and probably smile. Like I said, I feel bad for the patients, but I'll give it a shot. But that's what we signed up for. And so the idea that they don't have to do their job, or that they don't have to adhere to an expectation or a standard or a structure because they're busy, isn't appropriate. And so what we want to do is we want to enforce a positive culture where we say, look, when you're busy, we're going to help you. Go back to module week 1 when we talked about leadership versus management and ensuring that your employees have what they need to do their job. By building that culture from our managerial staff, we can start to bring that down. Now they understand that if I come up and I say, hey, man, what's up with your shirt? Why is it all wrinkly today? Right. That I'm not picking on him. That's just the standard discipline. And that he could say, oh, yeah, you're right. My shirt's wrinkly. You know what? I didn't realize that this was the shirt that I had in the trunk of my car. And so let me fix that. Versus not saying anything to him and or her, and then letting them get a write up, and now they're upset, and now that's discipline. It's punitive. Hey man, your shirt's all messed up. You good? Yeah. I went to my boyfriend's house last night when I didn't have a shirt. I thought this was fine. I didn't realize it. Okay, let me go in the back. I got a steamer for you. Right? Like imagine if the manager or the supervisor had a hand steamer for somebody had a wrinkled shirt. Yeah, man, cool. Just plug it in there when you're done. It costs $25 on Amazon. Little stupid things like that. Same thing with the care plan, right? We could have our formalized QA. Obviously, you get an incident, a complaint, you got to do follow up, you get requests from the medical director, et cetera. But how about the informal QA? How about redacted patient charting that you grade other people's patient charts and we redact all the names of the providers and you just give feedback on the chart and the care plan? How about automatic software such as I think there's one out there, it's First Watch or something like that, where it automatically grades the run form based on what the protocol is, and then going through that, letting them see that first. Code stat is a great one. We adopted a policy where we send code stat to every provider on every cardiac arrest in the system. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cardiac arrests annually. They all get the code stat if their service has signed up for it. It's not punitive. It's this. Hey, this is where you're at. This was your hands-off time. It's graded, and it's allowing people to critique themselves so somebody else doesn't have to. And that's part of the standard. We want you to be better. That is the disciplinary expectation, right? Now, sometimes you're going to have employees that just don't adhere to your expectations. So, the first thing is offer them the training. Make sure they're educated, right? Make sure that they know what they're supposed to do. Because when you look at an employee not adhering appropriately to the standard, it usually comes down to they do not know they're supposed to do that. They do not want to do that. They're like unwilling to do that, or they're unable, whether it be physically or cognitively unable to kind of grasp that concept. And so what we want to make sure is that our discipline starts with education. Education's first. These are the objectives. I want to explain them and educate you on how to reach them. Now we know all of our employees know. It could be simple thing as, having a table in front of the ambulance bay. And as everybody's coming in to check their gear, you do a quick in-service, 5-10 minute in-service on something if it's minor. It could be a mandatory training session once or twice a year for all your staff that you're bringing them in. It could be hosting for free all of their CME requirements, which they need already, but making it legitimate. A CME shouldn't be an 8-hour day where you just come in to try to get it done so you can keep your cert. If that's what your training division is doing, then we need to educate them to what our objectives are going to be. It's not the employees, it's the training division. If that's not acceptable, then break it apart. Hey, we're going to do 4 hours, a week for the next month. And we're going to hammer those 4 hours are going to be really positive, successful. We're going to get physicians to come in, medical director team to come in, and really assist us in delivering the content. Now you're setting the objective and you're adding the education. And then we have to keep an eye on whether or not this is happening, through the QA process. If it's a policy and procedure manual, we pay attention to the policy procedure. Then if the employee's not doing it, we want to reinforce that education. We want to give them every opportunity to be willing and able to accept these changes. And if they're not going to do it, then we have to have a certain discussion. And I would be candid with them. This is the requirement. This is the respect level we want, right? We want to continuously reinforce these things. One of the biggest things that we should be very concerned about is the fundamental EMS skills and skill set, right? The getting out of calls, the delayed responses, right? Fundamental EMS skills such as vital signs, These are all things that experienced tenured providers sometimes take for granted. We have to reinforce that. We want to reinforce that. We want to make sure that they keep building up a positive work environment and have a good understanding of, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do on every single call. And the challenge is always going to be to do these in a positive light, because you're always going to have your unwillings. You're always going to have your 10%. And so in management, we always say there's the 90-10 rule, right? 10% of your employee base is going to take up 90% of your time. And the key for us, I think, is to make sure that we can get the other 90% of the employees to reinforce such a culture that the 10% is ostracized. And the way you do that is not suck, right? Like, don't kick your own butt, right? Make sure that you are a positive force for good. Make sure that you don't lose your cool, that you don't start dropping F-bombs and stuff. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard in this industry. They're going to push you. We know, right? We're all, outgoing, usually extroverted personalities that know how to push buttons, and if you're in the fire service or the rescue service, EMS service exclusively, you're going to sit in your car and you're going to mess with your partner, or you're going to sit in a firehouse and figure out ways to tweak your brothers and sisters. And I don't know why we do that. Maybe we're just all crazy, but it's tough, because there's going to be people that are going to try to push you to get you to snap. And the personality that made you great in this industry is the exact personality that might lead you to snap. So you have to learn to maintain your cool, because you don't want to give any credibility to the 10%. You want it to remain positive. Another old service leader that used to mentor me said, when you become a chief officer, in a service like this, in a BMS or fire service, when you become a chief, as soon as you walk in the door, 40% of the people are going to love you already because they've worked with you before, or just because you're chief. And then 10% of the people are going to freaking hate you, no matter what you do, because you're chief. And then 40% of the middle 40%, they don't care. They're not made up. Your job is to make sure that middle 40% hangs out with the 40% that likes you and follows them in their lead, and not the 10% that don't. So every time you make a screw up, you're going to alienate pieces of that middle 40% to make up their mind against you, because they're friends with people in that 10%. Right? So we need to make sure that we try and include everybody in the discipline process, including the 10%, and make sure we try to encourage them to move as positive as positive a direction as possible. So that's it. That's my spiel for this, and hope you got something out of it. Feel free to ask any questions, shoot me email, shoot me message, and looking forward to seeing your work. Thanks.